Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Metabolism and Menopause podcast. My name is Stephanie, and I am your host and CEO of Vitality OET. We are a women's nutrition, health, and fitness coaching company that focuses predominantly on women's hormones, particularly as they start going through perimenopause and onwards. We know that you start experiencing so many changes in this time of your life, whether it be hot flashes, night sweats, irritability, brain fog, or waking around the middle that seems to come out of absolutely nowhere despite you not changing anything. So you go back to those tried and true methods of cutting calories, cutting carbs, doing a bunch of cardio, yet it feels like nothing is working. You're putting in all this effort and you're actually just moving backwards. But we know now that your body is inherently different now that you've gone through these hormonal changes. So our mission here at Vitality is to really help you understand how your body changes in this time of your life so you can reach those health and fitness goals, feel in control and at home in your body again, live a life full of vitality, and really understand how to take care of this new body of yours. So today I have the wonderful coach Chelsey on, and we are going to be diving into the topic of happy hormones. And we often spend a lot of time talking about like our sex hormones, right? We talk about estrogen, we talk about progesterone and how those are changing in perimenopause and menopause. But there are a whole other group of hormones that actually go by many titles like neuropeptides, neurotransmitters, neuromodulators, and hormones that can also be impacted as well during this time in your life. And there's Dr. Candace Pert. She's an American neuroscientist. She coined this term called molecules of emotion. And when she explored the idea that our neuropeptides and neurotransmitters, which are basically just chemicals that we have in our brain and our body, they play a very big role in creating our emotions. One of the things that she really touted for emphasizing is that these molecules influence the mind and the body, and that our emotions and our physical health are very much so interconnected. So I think you can all remember days where you're like in a bad mood and you're feeling tired. That's not the day you want to eat a salad. That's not the day you want to go exercise. You want to sit on the couch, you want to veg, and that's it, right? So it's important to understand, like, we go through so many mood changes during perimenopause and menopause, right? We become more irritable. We start having things like brain fog, but like we're quicker to temper, right? It's like we have a shorter fuse a lot. The things that used to bring us joy don't bring us as much joy as it used to. Like, we just don't feel like ourselves. And this is a very big part of this. So we really want to touch on all these different things that actually affect your mood and like your happiness and your joy. So today we're going to look at some of those specific molecules of emotion, learn what they are, why we want them, how they are affected during perimenopause and menopause and our hormonal changes, because we know that influences so many things in our body, and then what we can do to support them. So we're going to go through each one, discuss some things overall that you can focus on and do to really improve and impact them all. Because again, you go through so many things and like your mood changes and you don't feel like yourself. So we want to give you some like actionable steps to help improve all these like quote unquote happy hormones, right? To get you in a better space. So we just did a podcast on this one not that long ago on serotonin. So Chelsey, let's dive into this one first, just briefly, and then we'll hop into all the other ones.
Yes, absolutely. So we won't spend a ton of time on serotonin, but it is a really important one. So I wanted to include it again here because it plays such a significant role in our mood. So serotonin, or 5-HT, which stands for 5-hydroxytryptamine, is often thought of as our happy hormone. It plays a big role as being both a neurotransmitter, which is a chemical messenger, and their job is to work in the brain and allow communication between our brain and our body. It also plays the role of a hormone and a neuromodulator. And that term means that basically what it does is it controls when and how much is released based on the feedback that it's receiving from our body. So we can often think of the communication between our brain and our body as like a two-way highway. So we have information going down one way into our body and then the information coming back up to our brain. And so one of serotonin's role is to decide what to do with that information and how much of things need to be released. So let's dive into why we want serotonin. Serotonin is responsible for our long-term satisfaction. It's often thought of as like our gratitude, right? It helps to regulate our sleep-wake cycle because of its role in melatonin production. So serotonin is a precursor for melatonin. It also plays a role in supporting our immune system and actually in our pain tolerance as well, which is going to be a recurring theme here, which is quite interesting in terms of how these neuropeptides play a role in our body.
So how serotonin is made in our body, it's an amino acid amino acid, which is one of the building blocks of protein called L-tryptophan, and it's a precursor to serotonin. So if you don't have enough protein, you literally cannot make serotonin, and therefore you cannot be happy. So protein literally makes you happy. Okay, so we need this. Tryptophan is converted into 5-HTP, and then 5-HTP is then converted into serotonin. So it goes amino acid, and then it goes conversion to get to serotonin. So how do they interact? Serotonin plays a very important role in our body. It's an inhibitory neurotransmitter. So what this means is it can block and prevent messages from being sent any further. So it's like this roadblock. And it does this to help calm brain activity and balance mood. So if you don't have this roadblock to like prevent the stuff coming back up to your brain, you can have like things like anxiety, and you can start having all these poor moods, which I think all of us can like relate to, especially as we're getting older, right? That we start feeling different, like things that didn't used to make us upset now upset us, right? Serotonin is part of this problem. So how it is affected by perimenopause and menopause. As that lovely hormone estrogen, we know that she is a drama queen, but unfortunately she controls a lot of stuff in our body. And as soon as she starts to decline, we can see changes in the amount of serotonin receptors that we actually have and how long those receptors are able to bind. So to gain the positive effects from serotonin. So what this means is there's just like less of them for serotonin to actually attach to. So it's harder to get the full effect from serotonin. So serotonin helps to regulate our mood by stabilizing our mood, anxiety. It sends the message to the brain that, hey, we're okay. This feels good. I've had enough. Helps reduce impulsive behaviors, right? Like it's like, oh, I'm satisfied from this. I don't need to have another cookie. I don't have to have another drink, whatever it might be, right? So when our serotonin levels are lower, it can make us act way more impulsive, and we can see negative impacts on our mood. So this is where it's like, man, like, why did I do that? And you're just like, why did I do that? Serotonin. Our gut microbiome changes drastically during perimenopause and menopause. Up to 90% of our serotonin is actually made in the gut. So as our gut changes, we also see changes in our serotonin levels. And this is also why like you start seeing like bloating that I never used to have before. This is why you're like, oh my gosh, like I have these food sensitivities that I never used to have. This is, again, all these hormone changes that happen impact everything in our body. Body temperature. We see that when estrogen and serotonin, they both play a big role in our ability to regulate body temperature. So that can lead to more hot flashes, right? Appetite control. Serotonin and our next happy hormone, dopamine, play a huge role in our hunger and fullness cues. So again, that makes it so we have more of those cravings, those menopause munchies, right? And then sleep. We know that sleep is a massive issue for so many women in this time of their life. So when serotonin goes down, we have a harder time with sleep as well. So those are all huge, massive things that serotonin influences that you're like, yep, struggle with this. Yep, struggle with this. Yep, struggle with this. So Chelsey, how can we support it?
Okay, so let's dive into how we can support it. And I'm going to tell you right now, there's going to be some recurring themes here in terms of how we can support all of our neurotransmitters. But one of the most important things that we can do to help to support our serotonin is really focusing on our diet. We talked about the fact that serotonin uses the amino acid L-tryptophan as a precursor. But what we didn't mention is that it also requires a sugar molecule, so a carb. And it's looking for specific sugar molecules that come from complex carbs to be made. So we want to make sure that we're eating foods that are high in tryptophan. So things like chicken, turkey, eggs, fish, tofu, and even some of our seeds can be high in tryptophan. But then we also want to make sure that we are prioritizing those good complex carbs. So things like our sweet potatoes, our apples, our pears, our steel-cut oats, brown rice or white rice, beans, and lentils. The next thing that we can really do here is to focus on and prioritize our physical activity. So resistance training, cardio, walking, all of those things are going to have a really positive impact on serotonin activity in the brain. Now, we also mentioned how much our gut is changing during perimenopause and menopause. So supporting your gut, making sure you're getting enough fiber, making sure that if needed, you are supplementing with some probiotics or eating probiotic-rich foods can be really, really beneficial. We can do this by focusing on prebiotics, so the foods that feed our probiotics, and then resistant starches are huge in terms of helping to support our short-chain fatty acid production, which is very, very beneficial for our large intestine. Morning sunlight and other circadian rhythm supports. So we always talk about this. This is one of the things that we always mention as being so important, but really working to get that morning sunlight in your face first thing in the morning or as soon as you can. I'm waking up right now and it's pitch black outside. So I'm, doing my workout and then going for my walk, but getting that sunlight and that morning light in my face as early as possible. And then making sure that I have like a really good bedtime routine where I have a regular bedtime to help to support that circadian rhythm. The final thing, and what we love to talk about, supporting that stress, right? And making sure that you're doing some form of intentional de-stressing at least a couple times a week, if not every day. And I always like to say, like, the body hears what the brain is thinking. So the more calm and the more of a happy place that we can make our brain, the better our body is going to respond to these changes.
Totally. And with like the morning sunlight stuff, honestly, like how many of us wake up and it's just like we press snooze, and then we wake up in a panic and we're just like rushing, trying to get stuff done. Honestly, if you can slow down a little bit, like try not to press snooze, do like a little reading or a quick journal entry or something where you don't wake up and you're automatically like in that fight or flight mode, this will make a massive difference for you. This is something that I've like started doing in the last like month and a half, and it's been amazing, like really prioritizing that. And like, I feel like I'm a much better person, to be honest. So to summarize, serotonin plays a massive role in how we feel, specifically when it comes to long-term gratification and gratitude. It impacts our sleep, our immune system, and our pain perception. It's impacted by changes in the gut, changes in our hormone levels during perimenopause and menopause, and the best ways to help support it are to adjust and support our circadian rhythm, so those sleep-wake cycles, focusing on protein and complex carbs, you need the carbs in there, and stress management. So now we're going to talk about the next one, which kind of goes hand in hand with serotonin. They're probably the two that are the most common and most talked about, and it's dopamine. And dopamine there's a lot of research on it now. Very interesting. So Chelsey, I'll let you kind of start off with like, what is it? Why do we want it?
Yes. So dopamine is often referred to as our motivation molecule. And much like serotonin, dopamine is a neurotransmitter. And it is often referred to and falls into that category of our feel-good hormones or our feel-good neurotransmitters because it plays a big role in the reward system in the brain. It does this by helping to regulate our mood, our motivation, our pleasure, and our attention. So why we want dopamine? There are a couple of different reasons. The first being that motivation and reward. So dopamine is released in anticipation of and during activities that bring pleasure. So these are things like eating food, exercising, or even something like achieving a goal. It deepens neural pathways and reinforces behaviors by reminding us that they feel good so that we should repeat them. This is often why when we are feeling low, we reach for those sweet treats that we know are going to give us that quick hit of dopamine, because not only are we getting it in anticipation of eating it, but then we're also getting a little bit when we actually eat it. The other thing that it plays a role in is our cognitive function. So dopamine plays a role in attention, learning, and our memory. And we all know that we start to experience brain fog and issues with memory as we are going through perimenopause and menopause. So dopamine's role is that it can really help us to focus on tasks and then also plays a role in our ability to retain information. The other interesting role that dopamine has in our body is that it plays a role in our movement control. So this involves our coordination as well. And oftentimes what they find is that in conditions like Parkinson's disease, they actually see a deficiency in dopamine.
Okay, so now for how it's made in the body, but I actually want to I went to an event and we were talking about like anxiety and like mindset and things like that. And they actually talked about the differences in dopamine and serotonin because like those two kind of get like interchangeable a lot. Like they're both like, oh, happy hormones, happy hormones. And the way he described it was serotonin is like your confidence, like you crushed it, fulfillment molecule, like, you know, like you feel good, you have this like long-term gratification, like, oh yeah, like I crushed it, right? Whereas dopamine is more like reward and optimism almost. And he said like there's this issue where we're trying to get this dopamine hit all the time. But dopamine, like the best form of it is you get it when you work hard and like you earn it. So it's like dopamine without struggle like it leaves you feeling unmotivated because like you're getting the hit without actually doing something. So then it leads to people like not wanting to do stuff. So for example, exercise. Exercise is great for like releasing dopamine afterwards. And it's like, but people are so used to getting dopamine from like their phones and things like that, right? Or the sugary foods and stuff, which I thought was like super interesting way to like compare the two. So he was like, you have to be careful about getting dopamine when you don't like quote unquote earn it. And I was like, oh, I love this. Love it, because then it can be like really like not motivating. And I'm like, oh, that's so interesting.
There's a really interesting connection between dopamine and our next one, oxytocin as well, and how oxytocin plays a role in like our body's ability to like feel that dopamine.
Yeah, I love this stuff so much. Like you guys, when Chelsey and I get together, it's just nerd city. Like we love this stuff. Same with Carrie on it. Just like we get so into like, love it. Okay, so how it's made. Let's segue back on track here. So dopamine is made in your brain and the adrenal glands. So adrenal glands, remember that's also where cortisol is made. So let's just like tuck that away for later. And much like serotonin, it starts with an amino acid, but this time it's tyrosine. So it's converted into L-DOPA by an enzyme, and then it's converted into dopamine. So again, dopamine and serotonin, you both need adequate levels of whole food protein sources, okay? Very important, very important. When your dopamine levels are low, you have no motivation. You lack pleasure and enjoyable activities. Start having memory problems. You have trouble paying attention. Maybe there's some sadness, depression, actually having muscle cramps and restless leg syndromes and tremors, poor balance and coordination. So these are all associated with low dopamine. Okay. And then when levels are really high, we can also have some like not so great things. We can have mania. We can have restlessness, excess energy, irritability, anxiousness. So remember how I said like our phones and screens can like give us a bunch of dopamine? What happens when your kid is on a screen for too long? They're not the best behaved after, right? They have excess energy. They're also irritable and grouchy, right? They're like restless. They just can't seem to calm down. Yes. Right? And we're just bigger versions of toddlers. And during perimenopause and menopause, when our hormones start to do crazy things, we already trend towards these kinds of things, right? So you can see how like being addicted to our phones and stuff like that can make this worse. So how it's affected in perimenopause and menopause. Estrogen, of course, again, is going to play a massive role in the modulation of our dopamine levels in the brain. So it helps create or regulate the creation of dopamine when it's released and how the receptors in the brain act. So like really controls a massive part of that. So again, estrogen, when it declines, things start to happen, right? So Chelsey, how can we support dopamine levels to be in the healthy range? Not too high, not too low, the lovely Goldilocks range.
Yeah, so there are a number of things again, and we're going to start with diet because we are very nutrition focused at Vitality. So when it comes to supporting our dopamine levels through our diet, we again want to make sure that we are getting adequate protein in our diet. So specific proteins that are rich in that L-tyrosine, which is that precursor for our dopamine, are foods like soy products, chicken, turkey, fish, avocado, even cottage cheese, pumpkin seeds, and sesame seeds. One of the other important nutrients is vitamin C. So really prioritizing your leafy greens and your citrus fruit, B6. So that's in like your liver, which is not everybody's favorite, but a lot of your red meats as well are quite high in B6 and your poultry. We also then want to make sure that we're prioritizing our healthy fats. So we want to make sure that we're getting adequate amounts of omega-3s and 9s in our diet so that we are providing our body and supporting our brains with those healthy fats. Now, there are a couple of other things that we can do here. Meditation or a mindfulness activity that you enjoy can be helpful, right? Because again, like delayed gratification and working towards something is so beneficial in terms of our dopamine. One of the really interesting nutrients that plays a role in our dopamine is the vitamin D3. So D3, which is one of our fat-soluble vitamins, which is why we need those healthy fats, it plays a role in helping with dopamine and like the conversion from that precursor, so the L-DOPA, into dopamine, and it makes that conversion more efficient. It also helps to keep our dopamine receptors healthy. It acts as an anti-inflammatory and it reduces oxidative stress in the body, which are two things that can play a role in your dopamine levels. So making sure, I always say, I'm like, for those of us who live in North America, we're typically vitamin D deficient, especially as we're heading into this lovely dark season. But it's always a good idea to have those levels checked first because D3 is a fat soluble vitamin, we can store large amounts of it. So we want to make sure that we actually need it before we start taking it. So much like serotonin, the other thing that we can do for dopamine is we can support our gut. So the healthier that we can keep our gut, the more diversity that we can have in our gut, the more diversity then that we are going to have in our microbiome. With this, that means that we're going to have better communication between the gut-brain axis. So some of our dopamine can be made in the gut, but that dopamine is not necessarily the dopamine that is used in our brain. So we really just want to make sure that those pathways are open and functioning well. Moving our body is going to be really important. Sleep. Again, one of those huge things that is so impacted during perimenopause and menopause. So we want to focus not just on the quantity of our sleep, so how much sleep we're getting, but also the quality, because it's going to be really important in the maintenance of our dopamine receptors. And then some of the things that we want to avoid. We want to avoid things like chronic and prolonged stress, because that's going to decrease our dopamine production and how sensitive our dopamine receptors are. And then more like the standard American diet, or the Western diet as it's sometimes called, which is often low in protein and fiber. So we want to make sure that we're having a really diverse and well-balanced diet to help to support these neurotransmitters.
So to summarize dopamine, it's a neurotransmitter that plays a big role in our reward pathways and our ability to focus. So when we're getting dopamine from things that we don't actually work for and then like earn that reward, it messes things up in our body big time. Okay, so we want to make sure that we're doing the things to earn the dopamine. During perimenopause, changes in our estrogen level are going to impact our dopamine production, the receptors, and the signaling as well. So we really want to prioritize diet, getting that protein in. We want to make sure we're getting our healthy fats in, our omega-3s and 9s. We want to make sure that we are getting good quality sleep, supporting our gut, and getting some sort of movement. Those can all really help benefit our dopamine levels. So as Chelsey mentioned, there's a very interesting relationship between oxytocin and our dopamine. So let's dive into oxytocin next. This is something that I think a lot of you have probably heard before of oxytocin. So Chelsey, let's break it down, what it actually is and why we want it.
Yes. So oxytocin is becoming huge in research right now, and for very good reason. We've often just thought of it as kind of like our love hormone. And we've often thought that it's just related to social interactions, our trust, often, parent-child relationship, specifically the mom and the baby. We get big oxytocin hits there. But we're starting to understand that it plays a much bigger role than that. So why we want it? It plays a number of important roles in the body. Number one is that social bonding. And we need community, right? Community is often one of those very overlooked aspects when it comes to our overall well-being. When we look at areas around the world that are deemed like our blue zones, so in blue zones are the areas where they have a large part of their population who live to be over 100 or greater. One of the main factors is that they can connect with those areas is that it's really, really strong senses of community. And they have very, very big social networks. The other thing that oxytocin can do is it can play a really big role in our stress reduction. So it can help to lower our cortisol levels, right? So this can help us with coping with anxiety and stressful situations. And then the final piece of it is our emotional well-being. So it plays a big role in our emotional resilience. I always say, I'm one of the main reasons people love going to the beach and watching the sunset and doing those things is because we get a bit of an oxytocin hit from seeing beautiful things and being in nature. And so oftentimes that is why when you are on vacation, you feel so much more relaxed and you're not as stressed out about things.
Yeah, you're just a little bit more grateful and grounded. This is what's happening, you guys. And again, oxytocin, incredible for lowering your cortisol levels. This is why we say get outside, be in nature, do the grounding, do those things, because it's shown in the science to make a huge difference. So how is it actually made in our body? Oxytocin is made in a part of our brain called the hypothalamus. It is then stored in the pituitary gland. And then it can be released into specific areas of the brain involved in emotion and social behavior. The release of oxytocin is usually triggered by physical touch or positive social interactions. This can be things like hugging, holding hands, even eye contacts. This is why we need people, you guys. We need community. We need this so much. Like, this is why everyone needs to be hugged more. Honestly, you need it. You really need it. So how do they interact? We have oxytocin receptors found throughout the body, in the brain, uterus, heart, breast tissue, like it's everywhere. And with appropriate amounts of oxytocin in the female brain, it helps balance the female neurochemistry, and through the neuroendocrine cascade helps to balance our estrogen and our progesterone. So hugging can help you guys. It can actually increase them both and help keep hormone cycles regulated. So this is why when you're in good social circles, when you're feeling seen, when you're feeling heard, when you feel bonded to people, you're having that interaction, why you are happier, why like your hormonal symptoms are better. This is why, like, it actually makes such a massive difference, you guys. Like, you have no idea. No idea. This is why I go to like working at home. This is why I go to like events where I'm with other entrepreneurs and other people who like quote unquote get it, because like you need this, because otherwise it's very easy to just like, revert in, and then like you're just not in a good place and everything just feels worse. So like this is massive. So when our oxytocin is low, we have a difficult time forming bonds. Like, you just have a harder time connecting with other people. You have a hard time making friendships, not sure how to like speak to people. You have an increased anxiety and stress response. You have social withdrawal and loneliness. Like, it's very easy to want to like hermit yourself. This is something that I dealt with for a long time, where it was like, I felt like no one understood me. I'm the black sheep. No one will ever understand me. I don't have friends. People don't get me. And it's very easy to just like, withdraw, stay home, not go anywhere, right? It's also associated with low mood and depressive symptoms and increased sensitivity to pain. So more oxytocin means like better pain threshold as well. Then there's the other side. If you have too much oxytocin, over attachment or dependence. So where you like feel like you can't do anything without like that person there or that thing there, right? Reduce objectivity in relationships. So like you can almost let like your thoughts get the best of you. Like you almost like work things up in your mind, if that kind of makes sense. Lowered stress response in dangerous situations, oversensitive to social situations. So you get like overstimulated very easily, or excessive empathy or emotional overwhelm, which again, I've had that also. So one thing over the other, right? So Chelsey, how is this all then affected by perimenopause? I'm sure some people are like, oh, like I've definitely like felt those changes. So what's the link there?
So again, it comes back to that lovely estrogen. Estrogen has been found to have a regulatory effect on our oxytocin receptors. So as that estrogen starts to decline or even fluctuate as we're going through perimenopause and then declining as we get into menopause, our oxytocin receptor activity and sensitivity and their availability can be affected, much like our serotonin. So it's a similar impact to our serotonin as it is to our oxytocin. The other thing is that oxytocin plays and has a huge impact on our mood. So when we have lower oxytocin levels during perimenopause and menopause, it can really contribute to those mood-related symptoms like irritability or depression, because it's known for that mood stabilization and stress reduction. And it was interesting, like with my clients this month in our group, we did like an oxytocin challenge. So we talked about all of the ways that oxytocin can, like why we want it and why it's beneficial in the body. Then we did like an audit of the activities that we're doing that could be draining our oxytocin activities and made a plan for how we could increase activities that bring us a little bit more oxytocin into our life. So there are a couple of things that we can do in terms of how we can support it. Now, there's not as many in terms of diet when it comes to our oxytocin, but it's more about that physical touch, our social connection, that mindfulness and the meditation. Acts of kindness can be huge here. So like doing things for other people can give us such a big hit of oxytocin, and then time in nature. So some of the things that we want to avoid are things that cause us high levels of stress or things that create chronic stress in our life. And then social isolation. Like, so we were talking about before how important community is. Think about how everybody responded and how everybody's moods were so low during the pandemic when we were all stuck inside, especially those people who are living on their own, right? Like that social piece is so huge.
Yeah, it's massive. Okay, so now let's make this connection between oxytocin and dopamine. So both dopamine and oxytocin act on specific areas of the brain that are a huge part of our brain's reward system. So oxytocin can influence dopamine release. It can help amplify feelings of reward, okay? So this might be like when you're being more generous, right? You get that extra hit of dopamine because that oxytocin like just helps give that little boost, right? This is why people say like, if you're in a bad mood, go do something for someone. Like this is why. There's actually science behind it. So when we increase oxytocin through releasing activities, it can in turn then positively affect those dopamine levels and their functions. So it can enhance that reward response. So when oxytocin is higher, the brain's reward system can be more active and make things feel more pleasurable and more rewarding. Oxytocin also has a stress reducing effect. So high stress levels can really inhibit dopamine production and release, and then therefore more oxytocin can release or help support more of like dopamine levels. So we want to make sure that we're like decreasing cortisol, increasing oxytocin to then help with your dopamine response. So like, for example, I'm very big on like rewarding little habits because again, this is like helping you train your reward system. Like, oh, I earned this. This is awesome. So it's like I told everyone on a podcast quite a little while ago, it's like if once I get to this point of I go to the gym 2 days a week minimum for X amount of weeks, I'm going to go to Lululemon and buy myself something fun. And I did, and it was awesome. And like, it's kept the momentum going and it's been really good. And like, it's kept me going to the point, like now I'm seeing more changes and I'm like, I'm happier from that. And like, I'm in a good mood after going to the gym, right? And like, do I always want to go? No, but I tell myself to go and it's always, always beneficial, always. So to summarize, oxytocin is our hormone of connection. We want to support it because not only does it help us feel good and connect to those around us, but it helps increase the dopamine levels in the brain. During perimenopause and menopause, those, of course, fluctuating levels of estrogen can really impact the oxytocin receptors in our brain, making us less resilient to stress, which is why like we need to lean on people more, right? Whereas like how many of us are like, oh, I don't want people to know that I'm struggling. I'm not going to ask for help. Asking for help then allows them to be able to help you. And then like when you're around people that are in a happier mood because they're helping you, then you get to help them and everyone's happier. Like there's this whole aspect of community, like, you know, it takes a village to raise a child kind of mentality. Like it's so much easier. Like I have a friend that she had her first baby the day the world shut down from the pandemic. And like she struggled so much because she couldn't see anyone. And like she had this vision of what it was going to be like. And so with her next child, it was a lot easier and got to be there the day the baby was born. And it's like, you don't realize how much those things impact you. And no, it's not just because like you had a baby and it's hard. It's like all the nurturing and the love and the hugs and the congratulations and all those things make a huge, huge, huge difference. Okay, so now we're going to go into the next one, which is GABA. So Chelsey, take it away on what that is and why we want it.
Yes, I took this one for you so that you wouldn't have to say this name. So GABA.
It is so long. Honestly, I always tell Chelsey, I'm like, it looks like your cat just like walked across the keyboard because I'm like, that's not a word.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I'm always throwing in those lovely scientific terms for us. So GABA, which stands for gamma aminobutyric acid, is another one of our neurotransmitters. And this neurotransmitter has an amazing calming effect in the brain and even a calming effect on our nervous system. So this ties back into the podcast that Steph did about the vagus nerve and how we can help to support our nervous system that way as well. GABA plays a critical role in regulating mood, anxiety, sleep, and muscle relaxation. So one of its main roles in our body is actually to help prevent overactivity in the brain. So like that spiraling or that like mental, like when your brain feels like it's going 1,000 miles a minute, GABA is one of the things that can help to stop or prevent that. Now, when we look at why we want it, there are a couple of reasons. Number one, it helps to reduce anxiety. So low levels of GABA are often associated with heightened anxiety and heightened stress. Sleep. Now, again, sleep plays such a big role here. So GABA plays a role in our sleep in that it helps the brain to transition between wakefulness and sleep. So it helps make it easier to fall asleep, and it helps us to experience more restorative sleep. And then the final reason why we want GABA is for the mood regulation. So it helps to regulate the brain's response to stress, and basically because it's like calming, it helps us to feel less of that stress in our body.
Totally. And I think a lot of you can like think of that where you're like, oh, I have a like negative spiral and I'm just like, it just goes. GABA helps with this so much. So definitely want that. We can all relate to that, I'm sure. So how it's made in the body, it's made from glutamate and another amino acid, aka protein, you guys. And then it's going to use another enzyme called GDA to convert it into GABA. So again, protein, we have an enzyme, turns into GABA, okay? It is primarily made in our brain, but it can also be found in the gut and the pancreas. So it hints that it also plays a role in our digestion and the stress response as well. And we know the gut changes during perimenopause and menopause, right? So another thing that we have to be mindful of. So signs of high versus low GABA. So if you have low GABA, anxiety, insomnia, restlessness, muscle tension, irritability, racing thoughts, lower pain threshold, and poor focus. And I'm sure everyone's like, oh, that's me. That's me. Also sounds like perimenopause, right? Yep. All goes together. High GABA, you are drowsy, reduced alertness. So you're just like sleepy and like in a haze almost, slowed reactions, muscle weakness, depression, lack of motivation. And I'm sure many of you are like, oh, that could also be me, right? So you want to have healthy levels of GABA. Very important. So Chelsey, how is this affected by perimenopause and menopause?
So we're actually switching hormones here when it comes to our GABA. We're not going to pick on estrogen this time. We're actually going to be talking about progesterone. So when we have progesterone in our body, it breaks down to a special metabolite called allopregnenolone. Allopregnenolone's role is to attach to GABA receptors in the brain. And what they do is they help to boost GABA's calming effect, which then helps to lower anxiety and it helps us with sleep. When our progesterone levels start to shift, like in perimenopause, especially if we are not ovulating, we have much lower progesterone. So then does our allopregnenolone. When this happens, it can reduce GABA's calming effect, which can lead to things like mood swings, irritability, and anxiety. So then the question becomes, how can we support this? There are a couple of things that we can focus on here. One of the first things here is diet. So there are some specific nutrients that are required to help to convert glutamate, so that amino acid, into GABA. So things like vitamin B6, magnesium, and zinc. So when we're looking at types of foods that help to support those, vitamin B6 comes from most of your meat products, like your poultry and your red meats are going to be high in B6, as well as some of your grains. For your magnesium, it's a lot of your leafy vegetables where you can get a lot of your magnesium. And then for zinc, it's things like mushrooms. And there's a nut too, and I can't think of it right now. But there are a couple of foods that can help to support with zinc here too. So again, getting enough protein is going to be huge here, right? When we are making sure that we are getting sufficient proteins in our diet, we are giving our bodies the raw materials that it needs for that glutamate availability, or the tyrosine, or the tryptophan for our other hormones. The other thing that we can do is do some really specific activities to help to support our hormones, progesterone especially.
So what can we do in general just to increase all of our happy hormones, right? Like there's been some things that have kind of like tied in together. So let's make this super applicable for you guys that you can like take some action steps, pick a few of these and like really hammer it home. Pick the ones you struggle with the most, because like that's probably going to see a much better increase in these things. So first and foremost, always diet. Diet. We want to focus on whole foods, minimally processed diet. So we need protein, right? We talked about we need a lot of protein. Most of our protein is not coming from protein powders. It's not coming from protein bars. It's not coming from protein Pop-Tarts and muffins and pancakes and waffles and cookies and shakes and all those things. We want it to come from real food, because those are highly processed foods, right? You don't walk around nature and find protein powder. That's not a thing, right? So want to make sure that they're micronutrient-rich foods as well. So get those fruits, get those veggies, making sure you're getting enough of those complex carbohydrates from the whole grains, right? Your rice, your beans, your potatoes, very important. Getting anti-inflammatory foods into your diet, right? So that we can help get the cofactors that we need to convert the proteins into those neurotransmitters. So this means like olive oil and olives and fish, right? We want to make sure things that are high in omega-3s and omega-9s, probably a good idea to supplement because we just naturally in our diets really struggle to get those in. And then also fermented foods like yogurt, kefir, kimchi, sauerkraut. They contain tons of beneficial bacteria to help support our gut, which we know is where a lot of these things are made or influenced, right? And then, of course, your lifestyle. We want to make sure that you're getting regular exercise. So there's a combination of your resistance training where you are lifting heavy. You're following the same program for 4 to 6 weeks. Every Monday looks the same. Every Wednesday looks the same. Every Friday looks the same. And you're focusing on getting stronger every single week. You're lifting like 6 to 8 reps. If you can lift more than 12, it's time to up those weights. You're taking a 2-minute rest and you're doing it again, right? And it doesn't need to be this super long workout. Like I am getting fantastic results just doing 3 to 5 exercises each workout. Like it doesn't have to be crazy fancy with all these weird combo moves. Just focus on getting stronger with your bigger muscle groups. Easy peasy. Okay, and then you want to complement that with doing some more restorative exercise, like some yoga, mobility, doing some walking, right? Those are all great options. And then you want to make sure you're getting adequate sleep. Sleep plays a massive, massive role in the functioning of our neurotransmitters. Serotonin, melatonin, dopamine, those are all rebalanced during our REM sleep, which is like, that deep quality sleep. And GABA helps us to promote sleep, right? Helps us get to sleep, stay to sleep. So we also know if you're not getting enough sleep, you lose less fat, you lose more muscle, your hunger hormones go crazy, you kind of go into more of like a fat storing type mode with the changes in leptin that you're experiencing. So this is really, really important. We want to make sure that we're prioritizing sleep. So having a bedtime snack, for example, is something we do with all of our clients. That is a huge game changer. We've had them like track their sleep with different trackers, and the amount of times they wake up, the amount of time they're actually asleep, it's massively different when they have a bedtime snack versus when they don't. So having like some carbs with protein or fat before bed, just like 100 to like 300 calorie snack, doesn't have to be big, like 30 to 60 minutes before bed, massive, stabilizes your blood sugars, helps promote these things to help you fall asleep, stay asleep. And then all these neurotransmitters are going to improve because you're getting better sleep as well. So some examples of my favorite bedtime snacks are like popcorn with a turkey pepperoni stick, oatmeal with some like Fairlife milk mixed in. You could do a whole grain toast with some peanut butter on top. Like it doesn't have to be crazy fancy and you will sleep so much better. And then of course, focusing on mindfulness, relaxation, and actively de-stressing your body is going to be massive because cortisol is going to tank all of these things. So we need anything that prioritizes and improves your cortisol levels is going to help with this stuff as well. So again, you need to address stress, but don't get stressed about de-stressing. Like just, how can I minimize this? How can I feel calm? What am I working on? Maybe it's a coloring book. Maybe it's a crossword, just something to, slowly decrease. And plus you'll get the little dopamine hit when you finish a crossword puzzle or you finish a coloring page, right? Like those things are really good for you.
Yep. I like to combine too. I like to do feed up with reading my book. So I'm getting to do something that's like calming for my body. And then I'm also doing something that's like great for my mind too. And you get that dopamine hit when you finish the book. So
exactly.
Now, one of the final things I want to say is that it's really important to note that there is no one size fits all approach to having your happy hormones in the places that you want them to be. Everyone is different. Everybody has had different life experiences and have different pathways in their brains, right? Because our experiences really help our brain to decide which way to go with different things. Because of this, it is best to have a really multifaceted approach. So for one woman, this may look like utilizing adaptogens, really prioritizing diet and exercises. Well, for someone else, it may be involving HRT, really prioritizing their mindfulness and prioritizing sleep. What both of these scenarios have in common is that these women are taking the time to take care of their bodies. They are both taking a multifaceted approach in how they are best supporting their bodies. It is also important to remember that during perimenopause, we can experience some really severe hormonal fluctuations. So things that might work some months might not work others. It's important to use a lens of curiosity here to really explore how you are feeling in your body at any given time and what feels right in what you need at that given moment, because our bodies need different things at different times.
Yeah, and it's going to change so much, you guys. Like so much. So like honestly, like diet is going to make a big difference, but also the oxytocin is a really big piece here because like oxytocin will help with like the cortisol. It'll help with everything in general. So find things where you're with a community, like reach out. It's very easy in this day and age to like not. So like I actually have it like I have like a monthly like we call them like KPIs, like key performance indicators. And I have one for my personal life because I'm a nerd. I love data, you guys. I really love data. It helps me so much. But I have in there like spirituality is one. I have like my body, my nutrition, like what I want to accomplish for each category. And connection is one of those. And I have it for like family and I have it for friends. So I have it to like make sure I actively reach out and text friends. Like I have my list, make sure I reach out to all of them at least once a month. And I go in and I check it off because it's important to like maintain those relationships. It's like great to send like pictures back and forth of our kids or what's going on in our lives. So important because like some of my best friends, like they live 2.5, 5 hours away, different provinces, different countries, right? Like, so it's super important to stay connected. And that's massive for me. But also the way that I like to like feel like I'm a part of something and like community is like our Facebook group and like messaging with you women who reach out to me. Like I love sending voice notes to women. I love helping you like ask the questions. Like that's how I really get my little dopamine hit is like, I love having conversations and helping you. And like, for me, that's my way of being generous and like sharing my time. And it fills up my cup so much. And when I do that, and then I'm with my family after, like I'm more present with them and I'm happier because like I got to be generous with my time and like help people. And so you got to figure out, what does that look like for you? What does generous look like for you? Like it doesn't always have to be like a monetary thing, right? Like it's your time. It's just helping, whatever that looks like. How are you getting that community in there? How are you getting that physical touch? Like that's super important. Like when I've had like a rough day, like I'll literally just go up to Taylor and be like, I need a hug. And then he'll try to pull in like, I'm not done yet. Keep hugging me. Like I'm not ready. And like those things are super important. Go pet your dog, spend some time out in nature, like figure out those things that are super important to you. I think I'm going to make like an oxytocin checklist to put on my social media that people can like go and like, you know, do at least one of these things a day because that'll make a big difference. Chelsey, what are kind of like your kind of things to help you get that dopamine, the oxytocin, all those things? What's your go-to?
So one of the things, as I was saying, we did a challenge with my group coaching or with my clients. And so I had everybody kind of do an audit. And so I really was paying attention to the activities that were, number one, like filling my cup. So the things that were like bringing me joy and making me feel the best. And then the things that weren't. So the things like that I noticed that were kind of draining those, I think it's really important to pay attention to that as well, because we can add in all of these things, but it's only going to be so good in combating if we're balancing out those things. So for me, it was like the doom scrolling on my phone, right? Which is a huge thing right now, especially with everything kind of going on in social media. I also have a tendency, like I love psychological thrillers and I love crime podcasts and like historical fictions, but like those can be dark and they can be sad and they can be scary, right? And so like I've had to make sure that I'm balancing those out with some things that are like lighter and fluffier and just fun to listen to. And then and like the other piece for me is the physical connection. When I'm feeling stressed or when I'm feeling overwhelmed, social connection for me is like one of the first things that falls and that I let go. When in actuality, it's probably what I should be leaning into the most, right? And so like if I'm feeling stressed or if I'm feeling overwhelmed, I will often like seek out Ryan. I'll be like, can I have a hug? Like I just like, much like you do, like I'm just like, I just need that physical touch for a minute. So prioritizing that and that like emotional connection with my husband, but also with my children as well, has been huge for me in terms of helping to support those happy hormones.
And I think doing the audit is very important because you will realize there might be some people that you need to like provide some more space between. I went pretty heavy on this a year and a half ago, almost 2 years now. Drastically cut down my friend group in terms of like people that I like communicate, and eventually we just kind of like moved apart, right? Kind of drifted apart with some people. And like while that's like yes sad, it's like if I would leave not feeling great. I would partake in activities that I didn't like enjoy. It's like, oh, I would have like a couple glasses of wine when I'm like, I don't even like to me, alcohol doesn't really serve me. Like I very rarely ever drink. So for me, it was like, man, this is becoming like a regular thing. I'm feeling drained when I leave those people. I'm out much later. I'm like not getting good quality sleep. I find myself partaking in like gossip and negative thinking and like spiraling, and like I needed to. And it was hard. And I had like one person was like, you don't want to come out and like do this anymore. You don't want to come out to the pubs. Like you only care about your work. And I'm like, if you can't, and this was when I was first starting my career, like solo, like opening my clinic and stuff. And it was like, this is very much a priority. And if you can't support me in a time where I'm like in a push, like it's not fair that you like, people want the version of you that serves them best. And when you start growing and learning and changing, sometimes that happens where you like have to let people go, which sucks, but it is what it is. But doing the audit of like the things that are draining you, sometimes it's like, okay, there's like people I need to have better boundaries with. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's not easy. And I think that's like a huge, huge thing to be aware of. What were some of the things that you realized that like weren't filling your cup aside from like the potentially those thrillers?
Some of the things that I realized were not filling my cup was so we moved a couple years ago, and I, again, like I'm finding myself without a community, right? Like in this new area. And I was really putting a lot of pressure and effort in myself to like create community and choosing people that were available just because they were, and not really choosing them because we shared similar values or that we had like a lot of like commonalities. And so much like you, I kind of had to look at those relationships and be like, what are they actually adding to my life? And if it's something good, fantastic, great. How can I lean into those relationships a little bit more? But also then like really paying attention to and prioritizing the relationships that mean a lot to me, right? So like, how can I maintain my connection with some of my really good friends from where we used to live? How can I prioritize my relationship with my sisters and my mom and like these people who are important to me so that I'm feeling like that cup filled, right? The other thing was just making sure that I was like choosing activities that were filling my cup. So like I often felt like I needed to do a specific exercise because it was part of a program. But I'm like, if I hate it and it's not adding to my if it's not adding to my workload and I can find an alternative movement that's going to work that muscle in the same way, what? Like pull-ups. Like I am like forever trying to get my pull-up, but I hate them. Like I actually hate them. And so I was like, what other exercises can I do here that would like give me kind of the same benefit, but I'm not necessarily having to like hate going into this workout every single Wednesday because I know I have to work on my pull-ups.
That's good though. That's like good to realize. I'm kind of the opposite when it comes to working out because I like to like challenge myself or like see what, because I hate squats. I really do. I freaking hate them. I suck at them. My femurs are so long that I literally have to like fold in half. Like, and my ankle mobility is garbage because I have hurt them so many times. Thank you, volleyball. That like my ankle mobility is just like not good. And there's just like some weird compensation patterns. But like this new phase I'm doing squats twice a week. And like, I was like proud of myself. I was like, you know what? I did the hard thing. It was like, for me, it becomes that dopamine hit almost. The one thing you will never catch me doing though is a burpee. I would rather pay you like $500 than do burpees. Seriously, I like will never, ever, ever, ever do them. Like, no. Like I would go to like a group class or something every once in a while with like a friend just to like, you know, do something different, connect with them. And if there was burpees, I was like, I'd rather do push-ups. I would rather literally do anything else. You will not catch me doing a burpee. Like I will modify it and be that weirdo who's like defiant to the coach because I'm like, I will not do a burpee. Okay, perfect. I hope this was helpful for you guys. I'm going to try and make some content around this on my social media with like a list of things. We'll probably have like a guide pop up in the Facebook group, I think, as well, because this is just something I think that'd be really helpful to like have something to help you walk through and audit everything and then give you some like action steps. So we'll work on that and pop it in that Facebook group for you. So just watch for that. If you guys have any questions, reach out, help me elevate my mood by letting me help you. So message me. I love you guys so much. Don't forget to subscribe and share this if it was helpful. Love you so much and have a good rest of your day. Bye.